What's going on, everybody? And welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Football Busters. Today is Thursday, October 27th, and I am joined by my co host, Mr. Eric. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. You forgot to introduce yourself. Your name is Will.
My name's not important, man. It's not important. But yeah, like Eric said, I am Will, and I will be your other host for the day.
Yep.
This intro is going amazingly so far. So
Swimmingly.
today we are here to talk about our NFL Week 8 buys and sells. So we decided to make it its own video because we do want to get more in depth with how you guys should be buying and selling these players. We feel like a lot of people on YouTube say, oh, this guy's a buy, this guy's a sell, but then they never really go in depth for what you should be looking for, what you should be trying to give for these people, or even how you should go about trades. So we're here to give a little bit more context and just go a little bit more in depth. I know Eric's very excited about this. If you guys haven't been paying attention, he's definitely more of the stats guy than I am here. But, it all comes in handy. It all, ebb and flow type shit. So, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into our buys list. And we're going to kick this off with Mr. Joe Mixon. Mr. Joe Mixon. Eric, go ahead and take it away because I know you've got a lot for this one.
Yeah, I like he said, I'm very excited for this video. I'm glad that we made it its own separate thing. I think it deserves it. Trading is one of my favorite things to do in season. So yeah, excited for this one. Did a good amount of research, especially for these top four guys that are easily my favorite buys. Starting with Joe Mixon. Stats wise, we'll do the stat dump and then we'll just get into kind of our general thoughts. Joe Mixon is among the league leaders so far this season in expected fantasy points per game. Expected fantasy points is basically just based on the opportunity that that running back has, or any position really, but based on the opportunity that that player is getting, the average NFL player getting those touches would be expected to score X number of points. And so Joe Mixon is a league leader in expected fantasy points, but his differential between expected and actually scored points is the highest in the league in the negative regard. So I think he's expected to score like over 20 points per game right now, but his actual fantasy points is around like 15 or so. So a big gap there, and we should expect a lot of positive regression to come his way. He should be scoring a lot more touchdowns, which is the next point that I'm going to get to. Mixon is second in the league in rushes inside the 20 with 23. He leads the league in carries inside the 15 with 22, as well as rushes inside the 10 with 19 and rushes inside the 5 with 12. He's actually getting just peppered with opportunities when they get down inside the red zone, and yet he's only scored 2 rushing touchdowns so far on the year. So I expect that to turn around. There's my stat dump. Sorry for talking for so long. But I feel like all of this points towards just lots of positive regression, things pointing up for Joe Mixon.
Yeah. And I think he is going to be one of those guys that's going to be easy to buy, especially if you got a team who has been sort of struggling. I know a lot of teams are kind of weird right now with injuries and whatnot. But if you come across a team that's, you could say they're what, 1-5. What are the records even? God damn, I don't even know. 1-6.
Yeah, we're
We're
through 7 weeks
yeah,
so far.
we're going into week 8.
Halfway through. We
Yeah,
haven't even mentioned that yet. We're halfway through the season. That's crazy.
yeah, damn. But when it comes to someone like Joe Mixon, people might be fed up with that, highest points differential. They're saying, oh, he's supposed to score this every week, but he's not putting up those points. So he is somebody that you could look into, whoever the Joe Mixon owner is in your league, and just start to inquire, see what it is they're looking for, even see what else their team needs. Now, if you're going to somebody who has Joe Mixon and their team's doing extremely well, they're 7-0, they're 6-1, you're probably not going to be able to get them, but it's still at least worth a try to ask and see because you don't know
Yeah.
unless you ask. So what would you try to give in a trade for Joe Mixon if you could say, you don't have to name players specifically, but just sort of like, I guess, situations or even player rankings? What would you be
Yeah,
looking at?
I could go into specific players. It's a little bit of foreshadowing or spoilers for ourselves, actually. Our top three cells at the running back position, I think, are good candidates to try to trade for Joe Mixon. Dalvin Cook, who we've been talking about. And again, we'll make this disclaimer again when we actually get to the cells. These are your guys that I think are going to continue to be good for fantasy, but I think are going to probably play a little bit below expectation or where their value is at right now. So if you can, flip them for somebody who I think is on the rise, then that's probably something you want to do. So guys like Dalvin Cook or Leonard Fournette, who's seeing his workload getting eaten into by Rashad White or Ramondre Stevenson with Damian Harris and potentially Ty Montgomery coming back. All these guys have been balling, and I think you could probably get a deal done. Maybe Ramondre Stevenson, you'd have to add like a little bit more on top, but something like that could probably get you Joe Mixon.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's one of those situations. It's somebody who could be attained. It's just you got to be willing to give up somebody for him, and that's what you get there.
Yeah.
And then going on to the second person we have listed in our buys, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Sun God, someone who's seen some struggles as of late, more so health wise than anything. Not really so on his performance behalf. Eric, do you want to go a little bit more in depth with the stats with this one as well? I do see you have some notes for this one.
Yeah, we'll do another little stat dump here. Amon Ra. So he has been just on fire since like week 13 of last year. He's been averaging a per game target share of over 30% since week 13, all the way through week 3 of this year. So absolutely dominating. If you don't know, like target share, typically the alpha number one wide receiver in an offense is somewhere around like 25%.
Mm-hmm.
And so for him to be over 30 is just ridiculous. And that's something that you love to see. And then after week 3, he sprained his ankle, was out for a couple weeks, and just recently got pulled from a game for concussion symptoms. I'm really tripping over my words today. And now people think he's not the guy anymore. Like, it's not his fault that he got hurt. It's not his fault that he hasn't been in the game. I think he's still the same dude. We just got word that Jameson Williams isn't going to be coming back for at least another month. So yeah, I think he's still a dominant wide receiver. I think he's going to command a similar target share to what he had been getting for the past 8 or 9 weeks. And I think he's an easy buy low candidate.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think the fact that his target share is as high as it is, when you take a guy like him out of this offense, it gets dramatically worse, and we've kind of seen that. I think this team's struggles have hinged a lot on Amon-Ra St. Brown not being in the game and not being a part of their game plan. And when they get him back, I think things are going to go exactly back to the way they were before, especially now that we know Jameson Williams, like Eric said, he won't be back for at least another month. So that's landing us at least at like week 12, right? Week 12 of the NFL season, something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
we're in week 8 now.
Yep.
Yeah, math. But yeah, it's nothing about these injuries has led me to believe that Amon-Ra St. Brown has lost a step in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I think it's just a lot of recency bias, and you may be able to capitalize on that. You may have somebody who, again, someone who's waiting, someone who's getting a little bit desperate, or just someone who is looking for somebody else on their team. They just want to offload him, say, oh, he hasn't played in a while. I want somebody who's playing now.
Yeah.
Might be able to land him. So I think I like Amon-Ra St. Brown on this list as well. I think it's a good pick.
Yeah, and I think people might be getting concerned about the Lions' offense as a whole. They've been really struggling these past couple of weeks, but they've been taking on really tough defenses in the New England Patriots and the Dallas Cowboys, two of the top defenses in the league. And like you said, they've been doing it without Amon-Ra. So I think with him back and a little bit easier of a schedule, he's somebody that you should target. And as far as who you could potentially trade away, again, sorry for the spoilers. I'm talking a little bit about some of the sells. I think a guy like Deebo Samuel is somebody that I would explore and put up for offer. He's got huge name value after last year, and he's been fairly consistent so far this year as well. So I think he's somebody that you could talk about. Maybe even DeAndre Hopkins. I think DeAndre Hopkins is going to have a couple weeks here, a good stretch, a couple weeks. But once Marquise Brown comes back, and he's an older guy. He's fresh right now because he just played his first game.
Mm-hmm.
Once he starts to get nicked up a little bit, he's been a little bit injury prone. I would definitely rather have Amon-Ra. So if you can make that deal with either of those guys, I'd be happy with that.
Hell yeah. And then moving on to the next person we have on the list, we have Mr. T. Higgins, who has, as we've known, he's been playing sort of hampered these last couple of weeks. And I'm going to let Eric take it away because he does have notes on this one as well.
Yeah, these first four guys, I got all the stats for. After that, we'll be a little bit more broad, but still giving you the value that you guys need.
Hell yeah.
T. Higgins, he's averaging 8.5 targets per game and 14 points per game in the games where he hasn't gotten hurt so far this season. But that includes the past 2 weeks where he wasn't, actively hurt in the game, but still recovering from his ankle injury. So I think that did hamper him a little bit, probably affected his total output. But even with that being said, 8.5 targets a game, 14 points per game, like those numbers are pretty good. But let's now add on to that the fact that the Bengals are becoming way, way, way more pass heavy. I talked about this a little bit in our sit video with Tyler Boyd and Hayden Hurst. So if you want some start sit advice, go check that out. Um, but as it pertains to T. Higgins, during the first 5 weeks of the season, the Bengals were around 3% pass rate over expectation. During these past 2 weeks, they've cranked it way, way up, all the way up to over 20% pass rate over expectation. So in neutral game scripts, they're still airing it out. They're letting Joe Burrow pass the ball all over the yard, and that means great things for all of the Bengals receivers. Um, so yeah, I just think if the offense continues on this trend, and if T. Higgins gets back to 100% healthy off of that ankle injury, he's due to explode.
Yeah, it's hard to see any real situation where Joe Burrow playing as well as he's been playing these past few weeks and T. Higgins getting the full health. It's tough to see any outcome where T. Higgins doesn't come back and just eats immediately and just gets slotted right back into that role he had right before he got hurt. So, like you
Yeah.
said, seeing their passing efficiency go up and their passing rate go up is amazing. And I think everyone's going to sort of benefit from that. So yeah, T. Higgins. What could people look at for trades like this? Something similar like Amon-Ra St. Brown?
Yeah, I think we don't need to overcomplicate it. I
Yeah.
think it's the similar guys like Debo Samuel, DeAndre Hopkins, somewhere in that range. I think that T. Higgins and Amon Ra are pretty similarly valued. I might lean Amon Ra just a little, just because I know he's the clear number one, and he'll probably be a little bit more consistent. But pick your poison there. I like either of these guys, or I like both of these guys quite a bit. And yeah, I think they're valued pretty similarly. So same guys.
Hell yeah. And then next up, we got Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We got another write up for this one, and then like Eric said, after this one, we're gonna get a little bit more broad. But it is good that we're getting these specific stats. So, got pay attention to this. Pay attention because I'm paying attention.
Yeah, so we got Chris Godwin, who coming back off of his ACL tear has been looking really good. He's been averaging over 10 targets a game since his return in week 4. So the usage is there. These are the underlying metrics and the stats that we want to see. The touchdowns just haven't been there. But the Bucks haven't scored many touchdowns just as a team as a whole. But I do expect that to change. Tom Brady's career touchdown rate is at 5.4%. And this year it's all the way down at 2.7%. The lowest touchdown rate that he's ever had for a full season in his career prior to this is 3.9%. So I just don't see there being any way that doesn't regress positively back to the mean, that he doesn't end up throwing more touchdowns per game. And I think that's going to benefit Chris Godwin quite a bit, especially if you're in PPR leagues, even half PPR. He's already like racking up decent points, but if he starts getting in the end zone too, like I said with T. Higgins, he's probably going to pop off.
Absolutely. If Chris Godwin's touchdown luck changes just a little bit, he's gonna end up being a really good option in fantasy. And Tom Brady, he's having marital issues, so it's just you gotta hope for the best. He can turn things around, things can get a little bit better because this team again is too good to be performing the way that they're performing. So you gotta hope that at the very least, just based off of talent alone, they're gonna start to get into that positive direction, and hopefully mindsets do start to change, and they can just all move together in a more positive space. But it's just Chris Godwin, heavily targeted. This is something we talked about earlier this season and this preseason. Like before last year, Chris Godwin was on a crazy pace in terms of targets and receptions. He was going absolutely crazy. And it seems like they've gotten him back into this offense and they've slotted him right back in that same exact role as he had last year. So, yeah, seeing Chris Godwin, I think he's going to end up being somebody who's really good. And if you can scoop him up from Chris Godwin owner who, maybe they're looking for a running back, maybe they're looking for a quarterback, something like that. But you're going to want to take a look at Chris Godwin and see who you can get. And moving on to the next person, somebody else who recently got – huh?
Before we move on, I just want to talk about potential guys that you could trade for him.
Yes.
So you did mention like running backs and stuff like that. It is good to get cross positional. Look at the other team that you're trading to and make sure that you understand their team needs before you go and make a trade proposal. That's something that we should have brought up in the beginning. When negotiating trades, make sure that you understand what the other team is probably looking for before you get into a deal like this. That's probably the most important thing. But if we're just being broad and general, some wide receivers that I think you could probably trade. Maybe not one for one. You might have to add like a little bit of a piece on top, but somebody like a Juju Smith-Schuster, who's had a really good couple weeks in a row here. I do think he's going to be fine going forward, but he's not going to be nearly as consistent as Chris Godwin, in my opinion. Or even a Terry McLaurin, if somebody thinks that with Taylor Heineke coming back, that he's going to uh, be more consistent than he has been so far this season. So maybe one of those guys plus a little extra piece on top could hopefully net you Chris Godwin.
Yeah, totally agree there. And then moving on to the next we have on our list of the buys, we have Keenan Allen of the Chargers, somebody else who recently is just getting back onto the field. This past week he played, started to experience, a little bit of a, not a re-aggravation, but some discomfort. So the team took him out. He didn't play for the rest of the game. And, they're going into their bye week now, so he does get an extra week to rest. Keenan Allen looking to slot right back into that wide receiver one role for this Chargers team who has missed him since he's left. Eric, do you have anything extra you want to say about Keenan Allen here?
Yeah, so I think he's going to benefit in a similar way that Chris Godwin has. Tampa Bay has had offensive line injuries and struggles, and so Tom Brady's had to get the ball out quick. Similar with Justin Herbert, they've lost quite a few pieces from their offensive line, and so they've kind of decreased the like their pass depth. They're not going deep as often. It's a lot of short and intermediate stuff, and that's where Keenan Allen absolutely thrives. And like you said, he's got a bye week to come back and get healthy. Hopefully, he'll be 100%. I want to note I separated these next three guys from those top four. I'm a little bit less confident in these guys, but also their price point is going to be a lot cheaper. Keenan Allen, like at his age, you hope that it doesn't, but it's possible that this hamstring injury just continues to hamper him throughout the season. But I think the risk is probably worth the reward here with Mike Williams out and him taking over that wide receiver one role.
Yeah, I just think there's no situation where Keenan Allen comes back and he's just not the clear cut wide receiver one for this team. So it makes sense to try to go for him here. And then next up we got Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos, somebody who I've recently been extremely frustrated with. It's just the team that I've been frustrated with. But it comes to a point where it's something I brought up every week as well. It's just Courtland Sutton's involvement in this offense and his target share in this offense is too insane to ignore. You can't 100% ignore it. So if you want to go a little bit more in depth about this one, Eric, I know I can give some of the stats, but I know you probably got a more solid hold on it.
I'm trying. I was pulling up the stats so I could look at them right now. I'll just go through week by week because like you said, it's pretty impressive, especially with a low pass volume offense that this Broncos offense has been so far this season. Starting from week 1, 7 targets, 11 targets, 10 targets, 7 targets, 11 targets. That's through the first 5 weeks. And then, the down week 6 with 3 targets. But even last week with Brett Rippon, with the new quarterback, even though it didn't turn into a very productive fantasy day, still 9 targets. And like we said, I think Russell Wilson is going to come back this week. So the chemistry is going to be there. He's clearly been the number one guy for Russ. It's tough to bet on Russ for this Broncos offense, but the volume that he's been getting is absurd. And if somebody's disappointed with him or is worried about what this offense is going to look like going forward, and you can get him cheap enough, then it's definitely worth it to me.
Hell yeah. I 100% agree there as well. It's frustrating because they aren't performing the way they're supposed to, but you can't ignore the volume at all. Like, you just can't ignore it, as annoying as it is. And then next up on the list, we got Rashad Bateman, who recently came back from injury as well. I think at this point it's easy to say that he's the clear number one for the Ravens. His target share has been crazy. I think it's like 31%, something absolutely insane. I just think with him back fully healthy and Baltimore's schedule going into the second half of the season, with it being pretty easy going forward, I think it's like the second easiest for wide receivers. I think Rashad Bateman is a good pickup in this instance just because of how involved he is with that 31% target share and that schedule that's coming up. I think it gives a good opportunity for Rashad Bateman to be one of those guys that who can help carry some fantasy teams going forward into the second half of the season.
Yeah, no, I love that take. And he's another guy that there's still some risk. All three of these guys have some risk baked in. He is coming off of that foot injury that kept him out for 3 weeks, I believe.
Yes, it was 3 weeks.
And so he came back last week, didn't get like the full snap share, I guess probably because they were still easing him in. There was a little bit of concern even early in the season with his snap share. He wasn't like 100% or like 90% snap share guy. Even as the number one, he was still hovering around like the 70s, I think. But I think this team, like the coaching staff is competent. They know what's best for them. They know that he's easily far and away the number one guy. So I expect that snap share to increase as he gets fully recovered from that foot injury.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, we just gotta hope that the passing volume for the Ravens opens up a little bit, and if it does, then Rashad Bateman to the moon, man.
Absolutely agree. And then rounding out our buys is just another tier of you're probably not going to be able to get him, but if you can, go for it. And that
Yeah,
is Mr. Christian McCaffrey of the now San Francisco 49ers. Far and away, at least for me, I think Eric also shares the sentiment, looked like the best running back on the 49ers this past week without really even knowing the playbook that well. So it's exciting to see what he's going to be able to do this week after getting a full week of practice under his belt and also having like actually gotten to play in a game, which is weird. Like he got to play in a game really before he got to practice with his team,
yeah,
which is sort of backwards, but I think that's going to help benefit Christian McCaffrey and get him used to that game speed that the 49ers play with. And he looks like he fits right in. Yeah, do you got anything else you want to say about Christian McCaffrey? What do you think that you'd be able to trade to acquire a Christian McCaffrey? Because you're going to
so
have to give
that's
away something.
yeah, that's a good question. A lot of the guys that we already talked about for Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, Ramondre Stevenson, those type of guys that I think are probably going to be on a little bit of a downward trend as we go on throughout the second half of the season, I think are a good starting point. You probably have to add like a little bit more on top. Again, you said it when we brought him up. We don't think it's likely that you'll be able to acquire Christian McCaffrey, but anytime this guy is available, you go get him.
Hmm.
So go check, see if somebody in your league is worried about it, isn't sure about the move, whatever the case may be. I think he's gonna probably be the running back one the rest of the way. So yeah, if he's available, go check it out, see what you can do.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. If you can get a Christian McCaffrey, you go get a Christian McCaffrey. That's pretty much it. Without giving away your entire team, but I do think he is going to be one of those guys who it's weird to say because he's Christian McCaffrey, but he could be a league winner, especially on this team. Like he could be someone who just carries your team week after week.
one Hundred
Um,
percent.
yep. And then now we're going to get into the sells and a quick disclaimer that we always give. Just because a player is a sell does not mean we think they're bad. We don't think they're bad. We think that most of these guys are good. We think they're going to have more good games throughout the season. When we're not just going to desperately trade them away for anything just to get them off the team. But we do think it's likely that their value is going to decrease as the season goes on, just based on trends and stuff that we've seen. And just to start this off, we're going to start it with Dalvin Cook. And I'll start this one off just because this is a trade that I recently made. I got Dalvin Cook off of one of my teams. I sold him recently. And it's not because I think Dalvin Cook's bad. He's one of my favorite players. He's actually been on at least one of my fantasy teams for the last 4 or 5 years. So he's someone I like a lot. I think he's a great running back. But when it comes to Dalvin Cook and his health, that's something he's always kind of struggled with. He's already hurt his shoulder once this year, so it's not super encouraging going forward this year. And another thing that's been extremely sort of discouraging for me this year is Alexander Madison. Now, I think a lot of people forgot about him because the past week before their bye week, Alexander Madison didn't play a whole lot. I think he got like a 13% snap share, which, doesn't sound like a lot, but weeks prior, he was getting like 30 to 40%. Going into this week, he was on the injury report. So that's sort of the reason why they sort of toned him back, got Dalvin Cook back in there. And even still, Dalvin Cook was having a very pedestrian day up until that 53-yard touchdown run that he had that kind of saved a lot of fantasy games. And I saw that. And, I'm kind of tired of the roller coaster. So I put Dalvin Cook up on the block. Someone had reached out to me and actually asked if I was giving up Saquon or Swift off of my team, which I said no. And I said, but Dalvin Cook is for sale. So he offered me Kenneth Walker of the Seahawks, and he offered me Brandon Cooks from the Texans, who Brandon Cooks right now, he's in a lot of trade rumors right now. A lot of teams have been inquiring about him, so that situation may even get better. That stands to be seen. But even with just the acquisition of Kenneth Walker for Dalvin Cook, I was a little bit more happy with that. And as you guys saw, Kenneth Walker this past week, super involved in the Seahawks offense, like hyper involved, even when they were in the 2-minute drill situation. And he's not technically the receiving downs back. That's more of DJ Dallas's role in that offense. He was still out there for 100% of that 2-minute drill. So that's super encouraging going forward rest of the season. And I just think I think my team got better. I don't think Dalvin Cook is worse than Kenneth Walker by any means, but I like Kenneth Walker's situation better. And I like, I just started to dislike Dalvin Cook's situation more and more as the season went along. So that's my
Yeah,
Dalvin Cook spiel there.
yeah. tons of good points, a lot of good reasoning for why Dalvin Cook is going to continue to be good, but is probably trending down, and you should look to trade him for somebody better. Just a couple things I want to touch on. You mentioned Alexander Madison. Alexander Madison has been getting really involved in the passing game and
Mm-hmm.
also in the red zone. He's vultured a couple touchdowns from Dalvin Cook already this season, and I expect that to continue. So that's part of the reason that we're looking to move away from Dalvin Cook.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, let's get into this next one.
Next up, we have Leonard Fournette of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, someone we're looking to sell as well. Not because Leonard Fournette is bad. We still love Lombardi Lenny. But it is a situation that's getting a little bit more concerning. Leonard Fournette, not the most efficient on the ground or through the air as of late. The team's been struggling a little bit. Some game script, you could put it up to some game scripts as well, but Rachaad White getting more and more involved with this offense as the weeks go along. I don't think there's a situation where Rachaad White is going to completely take the job from Leonard Fournette. I don't think that's going to happen unless some sort of extenuating circumstance that we're not hoping for. But with Leonard Fournette and the way he's been playing as of late and the way this Buccaneers offense has been playing as of late, I could see someone wanting to sell him to get him off their team just to try to see what kind of value they could get because Leonard Fournette is still a great talent. It's just whether you're willing to wait until this team is able to get it back together.
Right. Yeah, I'm hoping that the Bucks in general are going to be trending up, and so maybe that'll mean brighter days ahead for Fournette. But yeah, the splits with him and Rachaad White are definitely getting closer. This past week was the closest it's been all season. I think it was 10 touches to 7 touches. And Leonard Fournette has been really, really inefficient as a runner and even as a receiver. The volume has been there in the receiving game prior to last week, but he didn't really get anything going in that aspect against the Panthers. So, and I think Todd Bowles came out and said after these couple weeks of disappointing performances that they got to involve the young guys, see
Mm-hmm.
if they can perform. And when it comes to the offense, I don't know who else he would be talking about other than Rachaad White. So
Yeah.
if they are looking to get him more involved and get this closer to a 50-50 split, then yeah, I think Leonard Fournette could still have value, but I would look to try to get somebody else on my team that's going to have a better rest of season, including the guys that we talked about already, like a Joe Mixon. I have Leonard Fournette on a fantasy team, one of my main teams in the same league as Will is in,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm talking with a guy who is pretty desperate at the running back position, talking about giving away Leonard Fournette and also Gerald Everett because he needs help at tight end for Tyreek Hill. Um,
Mm.
so if that's a situation, something that you can get done, I just think that that's a much safer kind of stock to buy in Tyreek Hill. The injury risk is way less just at the wide receiver position versus running back. And Leonard Fournette has been kind of injury prone throughout his career. And then also, like, I just kind of think Tyreek Hill is better and is going to produce more points as the season goes on. So,
Yeah, that Tyreek Hill guy, he's pretty good at football, man. Pretty good, pretty good at football. And I think that's going to be a solid trade if that goes through. That actually makes me a lot more afraid of Eric's team. I'm not going to lie to y'all. But that's a great trade option right there as well. And with this one, I'm going to let Eric lead off with it. I'm going to read it off to you guys. Is Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots? I do want to see where Eric's head is on this one before I chime in. So,
yeah. So kind of a similar situation, like a trend or a theme that we've seen with all three of these guys. They're starting to share work, whether it be Alexander Madison, Rachaad White, or in this case, Damian Harris just came back healthy. And Ty Montgomery, I believe, is going to be activated off the IR within the next couple weeks. And we saw to start the season that this was definitely a committee. And Damian Harris was the lead back even. Ramondre Stevenson has been playing out of his mind. He's really, really talented. I love him as a player. And so like I don't want to get rid of him. I'm not like actively just trying to get him off my team for anybody, like we said in the disclaimer. But yeah, I just think that this New England offense is going to go back to a similar style where they go running back by committee. Even if Ramondre is now going to be the lead back, he'll probably get more touches than anybody else. But he's not going to have nearly the same role that he's had for the past few weeks where he's been dominant. So this is actually on the same team that I have Leonard Fournette. I also have Ramondre Stevenson, and I'm talking to the Joe Mixon owner right now. I'm hoping to offload him plus maybe another piece for Joe Mixon.
yeah, I can definitely see that. I know it was a little bit encouraging after the last game that he didn't split touches as much, but at the
Yeah.
same time, with Ty Montgomery coming back, the Patriots are going to be the Patriots at the end of the day, you know? And I do think that, I do agree with you. I think that it is going to start to turn into more of a committee look from all of them. They're going to get everybody involved. And the team just hasn't been all that great, to be honest with you. Even last week, it was like RHAMONDRE Stevenson scored, and he did do well, but it definitely he didn't carry that out throughout the entirety of the game. He really only scored when the team was showing those sparks of life, and then after that, he kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
So, so I definitely
Yeah,
do see that.
that's a good point. I forgot to bring that up. This offense hasn't been trending well. They looked bad against the Chicago Bears defense that hasn't been great. I think Ramondre he got like 11 carries for 39 yards, so not super efficient, not a ton of volume. The touchdown and the kind of garbage time dump offs really helped him in his fantasy day. Not that that isn't going to continue. He's still going to have scoring opportunities, but maybe not a ton with this offense being not as great. And yeah, I want to bring up again, like Damian Harris is a really good football player. If we're talking about this from just an NFL perspective, it makes sense to give a good football player touches and not put Ramondre in a position where he's getting a ton of touches a game and more
Mm-hmm.
likely to get injured. You want to
Mm-hmm.
spread that out from like a real NFL non-fantasy perspective. That just makes sense.
100%.
Um, so yeah, that's my reasoning for Ramondre.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I do like that. I was surprised to see him on the list because I know you like him as much as you do, but
Yeah,
the rationale makes a lot of sense. And then moving on to the next player we have on this list is Mr. Ezekiel Elliott, which is somebody that we can probably talk about a good amount. We talked about it in our last video, our start sits, if you guys want to check that out. But Zeke has not been performing like the better running back in this offense. And last week, you know, he did exactly what he was kind of supposed to do. You know, playing against the Lions, he had 15 carries, 57 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Which, yeah, it's the Lions. You're supposed to do that. They're the worst defense in the league, worst run defense in the league. If you don't do that, you're really bad. But I think the issue here is really where, you know, it looks like Zeke had a really good game here. You'd think he was on the field a lot, but he was actually outsnapped by Tony Pollard this past week. I think Tony Pollard had like a 65% snap share. Zeke was just under 50. It was like 49%. And I think a lot of people are going to try to attribute that to, oh, well, Zeke got hurt. This is why he didn't play a whole lot. But no, he got hurt during this game and he continued to play. He didn't come out of the game due to this injury. So it just kind of shows that he's starting to lose opportunity. And at the very least, this backfield split is going to be somewhere close to 50-50. I don't think Tony Pollard's going to outsnap Zeke every single week. But to see that in a favorable matchup like this, Zeke got outsnapped as much as he did, it's not super encouraging going forward. And he's sort of a two down dependent. Well, not two down dependent. He's a two down back who's sort of becoming touchdown dependent at this point. Because if you look at
yeah,
this stat line, this 57 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, I don't believe he had any catches at all, wasn't involved in the passing game. It just doesn't bode well. It reeks of touchdown dependency, sort of like James Conner last year.
yeah, no, 100%. Touchdown dependency is the biggest thing here. He's not really getting it done on the ground from an efficiency perspective. Tony Pollard is outdoing him there. Um, and yeah, he took another blow to the same knee. I believe it's the right knee that he's injured now 3 times in a row in the past couple seasons. Um, it's a sprain and a contusion because he got hit like straight on the knee, but also like hyperextended it. Um, and yeah, with just the workload that he's had throughout his career, the age that he is, the inefficiency that he's shown even when healthy, I just I think this is going to hamper him even more. And if the team realizes that, comes to their senses a little bit, then Tony Pollard is going to get more involved.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's going to be touchdown or bust for Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, you just never know over there in Jerryland, though, man.
Yeah, it's true.
Never know. And moving on to the next player, somebody we had spoken about earlier in this video, Mr. Deebo Samuel of the San Francisco 49ers. I agree with this take. You guys don't know. Eric kind of writes these lists up, and then I check them out. But I agree with this take, too, because this is the second week in a row that Deebo was out-targeted by Brandon Ayuk, which isn't a great sign for Deebo in the receiving aspect of the game. But that's not even really the reason I'm most worried, because I think at some point that's going to end up evening out. I don't think like Brandon Ayuk will continue to be super dominant in targets, but at a certain point, this acquisition of Christian McCaffrey, I think, is going to hurt Debo Samuel a lot more than people are giving credit for, because you don't get a Christian McCaffrey. You don't spend all those picks on a Christian McCaffrey so that you can have Debo Samuel in the backfield running the ball as often as he does. I
Yeah.
think they've done that these past couple of years because they've really needed to. When you think about it, like they have Elijah Mitchell, who, as good as he's played, he's an undrafted running back. You've got Jeff Wilson, who he's been playing pretty well, but he's been the backup for this team. He's always been the backup for this team. He's never really been the starter or thought of as a starter. And you've got Christian McCaffrey, who, for the first time in a long time, this team has an alpha dog running back in the backfield. I don't think Debo Samuel has ever really played on a 49ers team that's had that. I think that the best they had, like Raheem Mostert, and we all know Raheem Mostert can't really stay on the field too often, so he hasn't had to
Yep.
compete with them a whole lot. So if there's people out there who are still treating Debo Samuel as if he is a wide receiver one and they're able to pay that wide receiver one price, I would definitely go for it, because I don't think he's going to perform as a wide receiver one for the rest of the season.
Yeah, totally agree. I love all of what you said. He's been, like you said, getting out targeted by Brandon Ayuk these past couple weeks, and Ayuk has definitely been getting more of like the downfield looks, whereas Debo Samuel has been more in the short and intermediate, which was his game last year as well. But his efficiency last year, as far as like run after the catch and touchdowns, were just completely unsustainable. He's still really, really good. He's still going to make people miss. Um, but those numbers have dropped quite a bit, and that's shown in his fantasy production. He's been really consistent, and if you value that, then obviously you might value him higher than I do. But in half PPR scoring, he hasn't scored over 12 points. He's only scored over 12 points once so far on the season, so he doesn't really have booms. He's not really busting on you either, but for that reason, he's also hampered by. Ooh, was that a pause? I fucked up. What did I say?
He's not really busting on you either.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oops, whoopsies. I hope he's not busting on you. Gross. All right. Anyway, back to Debo Samuel. Guys that we talked about in the buys. If you can get an Amon-Ra or a T. Higgins for a Debo right now, a guy that's also dealing with a hamstring strain, so we don't know how long that's going to hamper him, I think that that's definitely the smart move to make.
Yeah, 100% agree. And then rounding out our list, we have, as Commanders fans, I'm sorry, bro. That was just
That's good. Now I'm thinking we're the fantasy football busters. We made the joke earlier. Busting balls, not busting nuts. I don't know if you even want to leave this in.
No, bro, it fits perfect. It was just so funny because it caught me off guard. I was like, I don't know if he heard that. But we're going to round out this list, round out ourselves with Mr. Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commanders, who, coming off of a pretty good game, off a team-high 9 targets this past week, 25% target share, turned that into 5 catches for 73 yards and a touchdown. And I think a lot of people are looking at this as, oh, this is Terry. This is Terry and his relationship with Taylor Heineke. Going forward, this is going to be a great thing. But it's kind of weird because when you look at this game, if you take away that touchdown that he scored on a 37-yard pass, he's only got 4 catches for 36 yards, which isn't a great day in fantasy, to be honest with you. And I don't think that rest of the season, I don't think Terry McLaurin's going to keep valuing or keep benefiting from those long balls from Heineke, because it's something that he kind of struggles with as well. And this is a game that Curtis Samuel had the same amount of targets as Terry McLaurin, and Jahan Dotson straight up just didn't play this week. So putting Jahan Dotson back into this mix where he was getting a lot of play, he was getting on the field a lot, his target share was high, I think Terry McLaurin's going to start to fade more into the background, more so like he was at the beginning of this season, where he's involved and he's in this rotation, but he's not this clear alpha dog receiver that he used to be on this team in past years. He's sort of someone that they look to to make big plays, but at the same time, they're not force feeding the ball to him. There's no target funnel on this team, at least not going towards Terry McLaurin. I think that's more so heading towards Curtis Samuel out of everybody on this team. He's been the most consistent on a week-to-week basis with target share.
Yeah. Yeah. Prior to the quarterback change, Terry McLaurin, I think, was somewhere in like the 17 to 18% target share range, which on an offense like the Commanders isn't super encouraging. Like you said, it did bump all the way up to 25% going back to Taylor Heineke. And I do think there's some rapport there. I think that he probably will get a little bit more heavily targeted with Taylor Heineke under center compared to Carson Wentz. So like that's a little bit encouraging, but
Mm-hmm.
this offense as a whole, I don't expect to perform as well as it did even last week. And like you said, he was boosted a lot by that long touchdown catch. I don't think that he's going to be scoring very often. You made a good point about Jahan Dotson not playing. Once he comes back, he was heavily involved in this offense prior to going down with injury. So yeah, just a lot of things I think pointing in a negative direction for Terry McLaurin. And if you can get somebody that's hyped up about him off of last week's performance and thinks that Taylor Heineke is going to be his benefactor, then it would be nice to move him for one of the guys that we talked about earlier, like a Keenan Allen, Cortland Sutton, Rashad Bateman, maybe even plus if you can get more on top of that.
Hell yeah. Very much agree. And that's going to round out our buys and sells for the week. We hope that you guys were able to get some, good stuff out of this, some actual, application when it comes to trades and buys and sells. That way you guys can go out with the most information you can when you're negotiating with your league mates. Make sure you guys drop down. Jesus, man. Make sure you guys drop down in the comments below any type of questions you guys have for us, any types of start sits, any type of fantasy football questions in general. We're looking forward to answering a lot of your questions. You guys have any rest of season outlooks that you want us to look into? Drop those down in the comments below, and we'll check them out. Make sure you guys check us out on TikTok if you want. Check us out on TikTok at Fantasy Football Busters. You guys will be able to check out some of the content we make over there. There's a lot more buy sells, waiver wire ads. We have a spin the wheel challenge we do every week. We're just trying to get things more, have more fun, get you guys more involved, and that's where a lot more of our more lax content is going to be over there. So if you're looking forward to that, check it out. Make sure you guys subscribe, like, hit the notification bell, do all that great YouTube stuff. Eric, do you have anything else for the people before we go?
I think you covered most of it, man. But I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did. Clearly, I'm super into this. Like you said, if you got something out of it, please drop us a like. That would be super appreciated. Helps us out a lot. And yeah, for sticking with us, for getting all the way to the end. If you made it, we appreciate you. We love you, and we'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.
Peace.